Hey everyone, welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast. This show is about helping you grow as a coach by standing on the shoulders of giants. Each show, you get a different mentor in your ear. The early motivations, the successes, the failures, the tools, the tricks, and the insight into where the industry is going. All of it so you can make your own dent in the world. Remember, success leaves clues. Now, without further ado, on to the show.
Welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Whitwer. On today's episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with not only a good friend, a good buddy, an ex-college teammate, the godfather of one of my children, but my business partner, Kane Sivesind, who is the co-founder of Coachcatalyst. We've never publicly talked about the origin of Coachcatalyst and went back to the time when it was just an idea in our head. So we decided this would be a great episode to do. This is part one of a multi-part series where we uncover, explore all of the origins of Coachcatalyst. Coachcatalyst started over 6 years ago as just an idea in our heads and has since come to reality. And with any new business venture, there's lots of trials and tribulations and successes, and we unpack all of that and all of the crazy stories that come around the beginning of any new business. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Kane Sivesind, my co-founder with Coachcatalyst. We'll see you on the flip side. Kane Sivesind, welcome to the Coachcatalyst podcast.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So for those of you that don't know, well, you listened to the intro, but Kane is one of the co-founders of Coachcatalyst, and we've been talking about doing a Coachcatalyst origin story podcast for a long time, and we finally freed up enough time in each of our schedules to be able to get down to it. And so we have no idea where this is going to go. We have no outline. We just have the Coachcatalyst origin and our own memories. So take our memories with probably a grain of salt, because we always remember stuff. We were all the best in high school, right? Or we were the best middle school football players. So when was the first time, if you remember, when we started talking about formally Habit Catalyst, right? Do you have a time in your mind?
I do. Yeah. It was very, very distinct. It must have been a Tuesday night, because I was late at the gym. I only worked late Tuesdays and Thursdays, almost positive. Tuesday night, middle of winter, driving home from the gym, just annoyed, just pissed off, because it was getting to be so hard to keep track of all these clients. Like we were growing, right? And I know you and I we were talking back and forth a lot about our gyms and how to do things, but I remember just knowing keeping track of people outside the gym, keeping them accountable, messages slipping through. I just had a really bad day where we dropped the ball with a couple clients. And I was driving home at night, and I think I called you up too. Driving home, was like, man, like, how do you do this? Like, what am I missing? And I think that kind of started the conversation of like, oh, I'm not the only one. Like, maybe there's something here.
Right. And to give even more background on that, the reason we're even talking, right? The reason we're even talking about the gym is we played basketball for 4 years together at a small college in Minnesota called Gustavus. And we stayed in touch, and we'll kind of maybe talk about those stories here in a second, but we stayed in touch afterwards, and kind of got into similar fields. I was an exercise science major, so I've kind of always been in this health and fitness field. And then you ended up getting your MBA in sports management and was really getting into the gym. And kind of that's how we then started collaborating a lot, because I had kind of grown into a gym, and you had purchased a gym. And like when you own a gym, like it's nice having other people in your circles, right, to just bounce ideas off of. And we had probably talked on a number of occasions on like, how do we run better businesses? How do we run better gyms? How do we help our clients more? But you have a very distinct and interesting story from the first time you met me at Gustavus. So I think it's probably worth telling people.
Yeah, I mean, so, like Trevor said, so we played basketball at Gustavus, which means you come in as a freshman, you think you're pretty good, right? Like almost everybody who plays college basketball was the best, if not one of the best on their high school team. My high school was a little bit different, where we had, a future NBA player, like 4 different D1 players. So like I was not coming in thinking I'm the best ever. I already got humbled in high school by that a little bit, but still you come in thinking, hey, this is going to be a D3 school. I'm a freshman. I can come in and compete for playing time. And you get there and there's another 6'6", tall, athletic freshman who you're going to compete with, like right off the bat.
Right.
And I mean, the first time I set foot on the floor with you, you were quicker, you could jump higher, you were more athletic. I hated you. Like, it was terrible. It's like, no. Like this isn't the way it's going to be, right? I'm going to be the freshman that comes in and plays right away, not this other guy. So, I think it's natural to have those inclinations.
Oh, yeah.
But then it's interesting because we started off playing, pickup before the season started. So school starts in September. The season doesn't start till mid-October. So it's more just pickup, informal stuff. You're competing hard. Once the season starts.
One thing about a D3 program too is like you get recruited, but you're not like guaranteed spots, right? Like unlike D1 where they have so many scholarship spots and like they bring guys in and there's a scholarship, for many D3 programs, they bring in a lot of guys that are good. And then they kind of weed themselves out in this kind of early season type stuff. And so it's very it's probably a lot more competitiveness in a D3 program because you're really fighting for spots. Nothing's guaranteed.
Yep. So I think that definitely changed once we, started the official season. And once you figured out, okay, like we got a spot on the team, we're all there, we're teammates now. I think relationships shifted quickly. And, me and a handful of other freshmen who were kind of on that varsity squad, that main team.
Right.
I think we gelled quick. Like, we spent hours and hours and hours together every single day. And I think we gelled quickly. But that first initial meeting, I didn't like you at all.
Right. And there's no reason to, right? Thing. Like at that point, we're competing. Right. I wish everyone could play sports at a high level because I think there's really something special. And high school, there is something special too, but that next level where everyone is a little more mature, everyone is very talented, to be able to play at that level and be around guys of that caliber, it's a really special experience that not everyone gets to have. And I'm very grateful for having that. Some of my best friends are college guys that we played with, because you just spend hours together, whether it's on the court or in the weight room or you're eating lunch or dinner after practice. And ultimately, all of us ended up living together. Like all the freshmen at that time that were on the varsity squad ended up living together their junior and senior year. So Kane and I lived together. And so we spent more intimate time in our last 2 years. And so I think that's why probably starting Coach Catalyst together made it a little bit more natural because we knew some history, right? Like if you're just looking for a co-founder, right? If you're looking for a co-founder, random person off the street, like you don't know that person's history. You don't necessarily know their work ethic because most people, they're pretty much the same throughout life, right? Like the type of person you are in high school and like the work ethic that you put in, like that really doesn't change, right? And so having and knowing that history gives you some more insight into, is this going to work or not?
Yeah, there's, especially when you're talking about co-founders of a company, you need a couple things. You need amazing communication. I think there needs to be some level of trust. Trust is a word people throw around a lot. What does that mean? But just our experience, right? When we're playing basketball on the court, I already have that level of trust built in that you're going to be in the spot you say you're going to be. Like you showed that time and time again, that off the court, it's the same thing. Like I know that you're going to be where you're supposed to be. You're doing what you're supposed to be. I'm going to be doing what I'm supposed to be. That teamwork was just natural. And so going into that, it made founding a company so much easier. If it's trying to pull some random person off the street to do that, especially being remote, like being 7 hours away, there's no chance. Yeah,
100%. I think the other thing too is there's a realness. So when you're in a locker room with people, like you kind of just have to say it how it is. And everyone knows that, it's not you as a person. It's like, hey, we have this common goal as a team, and we want to be the best we can be. And we were fortunate to be competing for conference championships and that kind of stuff. So we all kind of had a chip that, hey, we want to win the conference, right? And in order to do that, we need all of us moving in the same direction. And to call someone out, like, that was completely acceptable. And so we understand that's not an attack on us personally. It's a, hey, we're trying to do all this together. And I would expect that to someone to call me out if they don't feel like maybe I'm giving the effort that I need to get, or I'm not doing the things I need to do. And then that other person would expect the same thing from them. It's all part of holding each other accountable. And in great teams, like, you're okay with that. You actually want that. And you expect that because you know that, all right, if everyone's doing what they need to do, we're going to be good and we're going to be great. But we're only as good as our weakest link. So we're going to help make sure that we don't have any weak links. And part of that comes from like a very real accountability. So being in a locker room gives you more, like, you just kind of maybe get a thicker skin, like you kind of understand that more, versus if you've never been exposed to that, it's like, oh man, like, you take it very personally. Oh man, you know, Kane doesn't like me, or he doesn't think I'm a good person. Like, it's no, like, that's not it at all. And so I think helps you just accelerate things a lot faster. Say it like it is. All right, cool. We agree. Let's move on. And we're good with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you said that perfectly. We know that we're all in this for greater good, right? We're in this for the company, for the team, whatever that is. It's not individually. So, I mean, we knew that there was no ego here. Like, hey, you know what? I'm going to do things that maybe I don't want to do for the better of the team. You're going to do things you might not want to do for the better of the team. Like, we know that going in. So there wasn't okay, like, we're in a company now. Like, what does that look like?
Right.
I think another thing is just our skill sets end up complementing each other very, very well.
Yep.
And that honestly started on the basketball court. So, like, if nobody knows, we're both 6'6", like within a quarter inch of each other, like almost exact same height. Right. Similar builds, you know, tall and skinny-ish, not as much anymore, but back in the day, let's say skinny-ish. But like, nobody would ever see me and say, wow, that's a high flyer. Like, I played low to the ground. I had an old man game when I was 20 years old, and it fit what I did, right? Like, I shot threes, I played defense. I did all the dirty work and did stuff that needed to get done. But I was a shooter. Yep. Trevor, he was the guy going up and touching 12 feet on the backboard. He was the one who had the big flying dunks and slashing and doing all that stuff. And so our skill sets were very complementary on the court, because there were certain things that I could do really well that weren't his strengths, and there were certain things he could do really, really well that weren't my strengths. And so I think we had that cohesion right away. Like, we had that stuff that complemented each other and fit well together. And then when we took that to the business world, it actually kind of kept going, where our skill sets are also, again, complementary. There's certain things that I do and I think differently than Trevor, certain things that he does better than me, and we kind of stay to our strengths and try to play to that. So I think it's been interesting to see that flow from the court to real life to business and through that.
And like, honestly, when we look at great teams, whether they're great teams in an athletic standpoint, or they're great teams from a product development or from a business standpoint, right? Great teams are not always the best in every arena. They're who is maybe the best in a specific arena. And then I match that with another person that's good in another arena. And we try to put these people together. But they also need to be people that work well with other people. Sometimes people that are really, really good or really, really smart don't work well with other people. And we look at it with like let's take basketball, for example, right? If you have 3 or 4 guys that are all the best player, right? They're the best player on the court. We put like LeBron James and Michael Jordan and all of these other guys. And if they can't work well together because they're used to being the man or the best player, like, that's going to be a terrible team. But you put 4 or 5 kind of role players that understand what each other's strengths are. And you understand that, hey, this is the guy that's probably going to take the shots at the end of the game. This is our defensive stopper. This is our 3-point shooter. You kind of know everyone's strengths. And I think the same thing comes into business and trying to figure out teams. Is the best teams are not always the most elite. They are usually the people that mesh the best together. And they understand that Kane does this better than I do. So-and-so does it better than I do. And everyone's willing to maybe set the ego aside for the team as well. And like, they don't need the recognition because it's not necessarily about the individual recognition. It's about, hey, we've got this thing we're trying to accomplish and we're all trying to get the recognitions for this thing. And so it's kind of fun. Like, so I think that's one of the reasons I'm a big proponent of sports, and like my kids are going to play sports and that kind of stuff, because I think it teaches you a lot of this stuff. Like, you don't know it at the time, right? You have no idea until you actually get a little bit older and can look back on it. It's like, man, like teams that were really good, like they had these things that just made sense. And the teams on that weren't very good, man, we had a lot of talent, but we just couldn't figure it out. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And so that kind of brings us to, all right, we did that. I did the health and fitness thing. Kane really got into the health and fitness world post-college. I mean, you were into it in college, but not kind of at the same level. You kind of found your passion for it later.
I took classes, like took minors because it was an interest. I didn't think it would be like a business pursuit in the future. But I saw you going through it, and that always kind of like, I was more into it for basketball, right? Like I want to be the best basketball player I could be. Yep. I never really thought about it as a career necessarily until
you also had some injuries. You also had some injuries that were really kind of like got you thinking and got you into some of those fitness circles. Where like, how do I solve this thing? Because there's no one here that can help me solve it. Yeah,
it was Mike Robertson. Like that's the reason I started a gym. Was I had knee issues. I mean, all through college. Freshman year, I barely got to play just because of all my knee issues. Between sophomore and junior year? Is that when we went to Norway in Sweden?
Yeah, it would have been right before our junior year.
So I hurt my knee again when we were over there and like could barely play. Senior year, I probably half the season I was battling with it and barely would practice and just limp through as best I could. Nobody could figure it out. Went to doctors, went to everywhere, rest and ice. Finally, after college, I mean, great timing, right? After my career was done.
Perfect timing.
I would get into like bulletproof knees and looking at some of his stuff, looking at more strength and conditioning stuff. Take a trip down to Indianapolis to visit Mike at iFast, and he like fixed me up in 2 weeks, just with basic good strength training. Good things that now I look back on are like, oh yeah, of course. Why didn't I do that? But nobody knew about it at the time. And so that was the first thing that opened my eyes of like, oh my gosh, I could do this as a career. Like I would love to be able to help. Back then it was help athletes, right? I want to help athletes be better, injury free, all this great stuff that I could never have. Transition into baby boomers, being able to like play with their kids.
You gotta pay the bills, right? Like,
depends what city you live in, but where I was living did not have a ton of high level athletes. We had a lot of baby boomers with time and money who wanted to feel better. So that was what we solved.
As a gym owner, coachcatalyst is the key to having low turnover. For several years, I struggled and spent 10 to 20 hours a week communicating with clients via phone calls, Facebook Messenger, email, and text messages. I had tried everything to make my life more efficient. I was at my wit's end. And then I found Coachcatalyst. Since starting the software, I have found a life again, and my clients are thanking me for being so involved in their fitness life. I've cut my daily commitment to interacting with over 300 clients to under 15 minutes a day and have streamlined my 6-week challenges. I couldn't recommend it more. I just don't know if I would even be here today if it wasn't for Coachcatalyst. If you don't have an account already, you're missing out and not helping the people you could be.
And so you got your MBA, right? So you got your MBA from Loyola. Was that sports management or what was the?
Yeah, it was sports management. I was going to be athletic director. So I was working at the athletic department there. I was the assistant marketing director. And that was my goal. Like, I want to be in sports and business. And athletic director, I thought like, hey, this is perfect, right? Sports and business. And then I would sit at a desk all day long, cold calling for sponsorships, cold calling for ticket sales, trying to do all this stuff, and then have to attend games at night for 4, 5, 6 hours doing everything. And I quickly realized I was not meant to sit at a desk. Like, couldn't do it. I would spend half my time on like T-Nation and like bodybuilding.com and like researching all this fitness stuff because that's what I really loved. That's what I wanted to do.
And so you ultimately got into the gym space in probably a different way than a lot of coaches do. A lot of coaches kind of, you know, they work in the big box gym, you get a clientele big enough, kind of, that was my story, right? I just got enough clients and then I ended up opening my own gym. You kind of came at it a different way. So how did that come about?
Yeah, I graduated from Loyola must have been May 2010. And within the last month, I realized like, hey, like I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. Like I need to go into fitness. I need to pursue this. Started emailing about 3 or 4 gyms in Madison, which is where I was from. I was going to come back to Madison, Wisconsin, and was like, hey, do you guys got any openings? And one of them reached out and said, hey, we have an internship started in 2 weeks. It's like, sure, why not? Like, let's get started. Let's see how it goes. So I moved back home, started interning right away. That was a 2-3 month internship over the summer, probably. This gym called Core Athletic. It's a semi-private facility. Looking back on it, it was actually pretty like they're kind of ahead of the times on some of that stuff.
Yeah, right.
And then got hired right after my internship. So that must have been September, October 2010. And I ended up buying and become the owner of it the next October. So less than a year later.
Intern to owner. It's a quick transition, right?
It was a quick. I was going to start my own, right? Like that was my idea. I'm going to get here, get some experience, and then go start my own. I was actually at one point we were talking about going to Minneapolis and starting one together, or doing something like that up in Minnesota,
right?
But then like I wasn't going to leave Madison, and I didn't want to start my own if the owners were looking to get out. I had an existing clientele built in, like just was easy.
And honestly, like for someone listening that is thinking about starting their own gym, if I was going to do it all over again, I would buy someone else's gym. Like having bought gyms and having started gyms, taking an existing client base and kind of making it your own in your own culture, so much faster, so much easier. Starting from scratch is really, really hard, really hard. And especially with a gym and something that has overhead and like, you know, you're running a gym. So you're not just like on someone else's dime, paying a percentage of every session that you run and just taking everything else home, right? Like you've got utilities, you've got rent, you've got property tax, you've got everything, other people's salaries. Like it's like, and so starting from scratch, like you need a runway because like if you're starting with 0 clients, like, oof, that's hard. But that's probably a podcast in and of itself. But
I think a really awesome thing just in this between you and I is we took completely different paths to get where we're at. And like since we started Coachcatalyst, we took different paths. So like you started your own gym from scratch, from the very beginning, grew it. I bought an existing gym. Then like as the software grew, I sold my gym. You expanded to more gyms and like owned more. So I think it's just super interesting to see there is not this like clear path. You can do it different ways, depending on, you know, who you are, your market, your personality, what you want. Like there's plenty of different paths to take and they all can work super well. It's just very interesting 100%. To see how much we're alike, but our paths are completely different.
Like 100%. I think a huge piece of that is understanding your personality. So like what is I'm a personality of, I like to have my hands in a lot of different, I like to be doing a lot of things, right? It's probably my undiagnosed ADD or ADHD or whatever. Like you just like to be doing like a bunch of things. That's what I feel most fulfilled when I'm kind of really busy in a way. And so I think really understanding yourself is huge. And then the other thing is, for a lot of coaches that might be listening to it, is gym ownership is not the pinnacle. And so I think a lot of people think that gym ownership is like, it is the pinnacle of the health and fitness career. But once you decide that you want to be an owner, your skill set has to completely change because it's no longer necessarily about the training. It's about operating a business that allows everything to work. Right? Your number one priority is like, it's still making the client happy, but it's making sure that there's a business tomorrow so that you can still serve clients. right? And so sometimes for some coaches that are elite level coaches, it's like, go find the best gym that's going to treat you the best and go be awesome for them and create a structure where if you're really, really good at your job and you're bringing in clients and you're taking on clients, you make more money. And the best gyms will have those types of structures because we want great coaches at our facilities. And so that's just something I always try to impart to young new coaches is gym ownership isn't the pinnacle. It is for some people because that's where they want to go and that's their mindset and that's where their skill set is leading them. But if you want to be a great coach, there's a lot of great gyms that are looking for great coaches and you can get paid well as long as the gym is set up properly. So yeah, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I mean, we still have a...
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I didn't have anything to add.
All right. So sometimes when we're recording, like it gets a little laggy. So I apologize if we're talking over each other a little bit. You know, it's the beauty of not being in the same spot, but also the beauty of technology where you can talk to people all over the world. So, all right. So we're both running the gym thing. We're very similar like types of gyms too. So both like semi-private, very coaching based, very intimate. We're not doing the 24-hour thing where people are just coming in and doing their own thing. It's very coaching based, and similar populations. We're dealing with your kind of mainstream baby boomer, your typical gym population, right? Typically female, typically weight loss. And they're just looking to move better, feel better, lose some pounds, all those kind of things. Right. So we're obviously having very similar problems, but we're in completely different demographics, completely different locations. Like I'm in a rural 5,000 person town out in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota. You're in Madison in the suburbs, a little more affluent population than mine, but like we're running into the same problems because we're both dealing with humans, right? We're dealing with humans that want to improve their life. So it's behavior change, right? And so I do remember at this time as well, I think I had just completed like the PN level 2. So I went through like their very first like beta program level 2. And if you're familiar with precision nutrition, it's all around behavior change. It's about habits. It's kind of like one thing at a time and helping someone, you know, improve their nutrition and develop the skills they need to be successful long-term. And so the thing I remember is I just completed that and we had been having these conversations. Like we've been kind of going back and forth. Like, how do we do this? We're running challenges at the time too. So we're like bringing in a fair amount of people, 20 to 50 to 100 people at one time. And like, how do we manage the nutrition aspect of it? And I've told this story a bunch of times, but it's worth telling again that my aha moment was we ran a challenge. And I had a lady step on the scale at the end of the challenge. And I knew her numbers before and I was looking at the scale and I could see that she had gained weight. And in that moment as a coach, I felt like I had failed that client, right? Yeah. I had made a promise to that client and a promise to all the clients that came into that challenge that we're going to help you lose weight. We're going to help you be successful. And in that moment, I realized very vividly that like, I need to do something different because I didn't know how this client was doing throughout the challenge. I knew she was showing up for workouts. Like I knew she was putting in that type of work, but from a nutrition standpoint, like I gave her everything she needed. I gave her the recipes. I gave her the program. I gave her the habits. I gave her everything, but I didn't hold her accountable to executing on those things. Right. And so, and I didn't know, like, I just had no idea. I assumed that she was just going to like execute this stuff. And so that was my big moment. That's like, we need to do something here. And then we started having the conversations and like that eventually led to like, hey, there's nothing on the market. Like we've looked, I would buy it if there was something that was there and I would use it, but there's nothing there. So it's like, all right, well, let's build it.
Well, do you even remember the steps we took before we even looked at software? I mean, we had sheets of paper.
I think we should talk about those a little bit.
Yeah. We had tons of these handouts that would have this information out. Aaron or Trevor's wife is a very talented graphic designer. And so we hired her and more just made her do it for free. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Trevor made her do it for free. Right. And she made these beautiful handouts with check boxes, 2 weeks at a time, you know, eat protein with every meal. Why is protein important? Eat veggies, all this great stuff. our clients would take it home, they'd put it on the refrigerator, and they'd check it off every day. Now, this worked great for a few people who had it right in front of them on their fridge every day. The terrible part about it was we didn't know where they were at, ever. The end of 2 weeks would come, they'd bring their sheet back in, and then we'd find out, hey, you haven't been doing anything the last 2 weeks. Awesome. Like, we're going to get nowhere.
Right. We just wasted 2 weeks. Right.
Yeah. And we had binders and binders of these everywhere. We were trying to use like a spreadsheet to like mark things off when people came back in with their handout. Like, we had all these different things we were trying.
Well, I remember the logistics on that.
Let us down the software.
Right. So I remember like the logistics at our facility. Our logistics were, we had like 1 through 12 habits, and like we actually had them on the wall as well. And they would bring it back to us. We'd put it in like a folder, and then we'd give them the next one. And it worked when we had like 5 people doing it. But once we started like running this with all our members, and we had like hundreds of people doing this, it was an absolute nightmare on trying to organize all of this. And it ended up like taking us more time. And if we would have continued down that path, we would have to like hire someone to try and manage the entire process. And so, like you said, we finally came to the conclusion that it's like, okay, like software is the only way, technology is the only way that this is going to work, right? At scale. And so I want you to kind of tell this story or talk about our first foray. And so mind you, for those listening, we're not technical, right? We're coaches, right? We're running gyms, like we're teaching squats, and we're teaching you how to eat more protein, right? Neither of us have any technological like code or like any, and we know nothing. Like we don't even know about it, right? But we're naive enough to think that, hey, we've done things in the past, we figure things out. Like it can't be that hard. Let's just figure it out. So we enlisted Kane to figure it out. And what was the first figuring out that we did?
The first figuring out was I got set up with the student like development group at the University of Wisconsin. So we're thinking, right, like this is going to be a simple little thing. We don't want to pay a ton of money to do this. Like, let's go student workers because they're cheap, but they're knowledgeable. They want to work on a real project, great resume builder, all this great stuff. So I go and I meet with a guy, and I try to explain what we want. And, oh, yeah, we can build that. We can build that. All right, sounds great. And we had a bunch of meetings time and time again. But we're dealing with students. So number one, not their priority. I mean, half the time I reached out and didn't get a response back for weeks because they had class.
Right.
Everybody we were working with was like graduating. And so they were like trying to get job offers other places and like studying for finals and all this stuff. And finally, I'd say 9 months in, they gave us a working prototype that didn't work, wasn't what we wanted, totally wrong with everything. So, I mean, 2 real lessons there. Number one, when you're non-technical, talking to technical people, you have to be super specific. Like everything down to the T. It cannot be, well, it's in my head. Like they don't know what's in your head. They're going to say, well, you told me to put a blue button there. I put a blue button there.
Right.
Well, no, like it needs to be this. And like, it's, you need to be super specific. And the other thing is we couldn't go cheap. Like the cheap route was not going to get us a quality product.
Right. We weren't out a lot of money at that point. Right. I think it was like $1,500 or something like that.
Maybe, yeah, something like that.
But we were out like 6 to 9 months worth of time. And for us too, I mean, we're still running the gyms and we're still doing all that. So this is kind of like a side gig for us. Right. And so, and even before we got to that point, we probably spent, I don't know, maybe a year of just like going back and forth and, hey, we should do this thing. Like, hey, I'm having this problem. You're having this problem. Like we need to really do this thing. Okay. And then finally this was a big step for us because now we were doing something, right? About the tech piece of it. We were trying to solve it in other ways, but it just wasn't working. And so, right. So I think the big lesson there was like, we got what we paid for, like at the end of the day. And so like step 2 of this, so we learned that, cool. That wasn't a game killer for us. We're like, okay, cool. Lesson learned. What do we do next?
So I started interviewing other firms. So there's more, professional dev firms here in Madison. So I started interviewing them. I still remember one of them I went to. The first one I went to was do you remember 100 State? Remember that place, the co-working space?
Yeah. Yep.
So I went there, had this meeting with this guy who was highly recommended in the industry or in the area, and really great guy. And I didn't think about it, but we were doing Movember for our gym.
Okay.
So we were all growing out our beard. We did beards. So I was growing out this big beard, never had a beard in my life. And the last day, we all shaved it down to just a mustache. And that happened to be the day of my meeting with this guy at a dev firm trying to pitch him our idea. So I walk in with this giant mustache going on, and they must have just thought I was hilarious.
This was before, like, if you did a mustache now, they'd be like, man, you're hip, like you're cool.
Yeah, this was before that was cool.
Right.
And I did not look good in it. Like, I can't rock a mustache. It was not a good look. But I went in and started telling him our idea and all this stuff. And, he was really good. He understood it. He started asking a bunch of questions, went back and forth, came back and said, okay, I think we can build this for $15,000.
Mm-hmm.
And my jaw just like dropped, like $15,000. Like, There's no, like, how I can't spend this type of money. There's no way.
Right.
So we started shopping other dev shops around, and finally we found another one that was, I think they quoted us like 10,000. And that was the realization of like, okay, like that is what it's going to cost.
Right.
So we ended up picking that company. So that was our first dev company here in Madison. Again, it probably took at least another 9 months to build, I would say.
Oh yeah.
And that 10,000 turned into about 30 quick. Before we had anything.
We were lucky at that point. This was kind of a break for us that the company that we ended up going with was also in a very like startup stage. Yeah. So I think we got probably a little bit more than maybe what we paid for. Like, if we were to go back and do it now, it would be much more expensive. But I think they were kind of figuring out where they're at and what their pricing should be. And we're kind of figuring out as well. And we were kind of doing this together, and we were going to end up ultimately growing together. But it was like a professional shop where they had developers. They were really advising us on like, here's, the platform that it's going to be on. Here's the code base, this or that. And the lesson that we learned from the previous one, and we learned again with these guys, is we had to be extremely, extremely specific in what we wanted. And so they were basically just going to build whatever we told them to build. And as we moved along and the relationship got a little bit stronger, they would kind of give some input. But right away, they're just kind of like, tell us what to do, give us orders, and we will go do it. And we kind of zigged and zagged and didn't have super clear on what we want to do and where we want to go. And so we ended up probably wasting some money, kind of just wasted money and time, right, doing that. And I don't know if there's anything more that you want to add to that, but that was really my experience early on.
Yeah, I think a big part of that too was we had a vision in our minds of where it could be, right? Mm-hmm. We had ideas of what we wanted it to be, and we didn't communicate that. We just told them the bare bones, the MVP, which caused issues down the line. Yep. Because the way they, like, if you remember the way they built it, it was a habit tracker, right? And we had programs which were just like a habit, and each time you assigned a habit to a person, it created a new user. Mm-hmm. Those were all unique users. And so we're like, well, we want to be able to message these people. Well, if Trevor's done 6 habits, there's 6 Trevors on the back end. Like, that's the way they set it up. And so if we would have been clear from the beginning, like, hey, we want to be able to like have this communication platform and like have a person do all this stuff and track it over time, it would have been set up completely different. And honestly, we're still running into that issue once in a while. In the code base, there's still these like different things that were set up from the beginning that cause issues once in a while. So it's
because
crazy.
when we started it, we were really solving a very specific problem. Like we did not start Coach Catalyst to be really what Coach Catalyst is today. It's evolved into that based upon like needs and wants and what users want and where the market's going and all that. But we started it, right? We wanted to deliver education and we wanted to hold people accountable to habits. So it was literally a sequence of lessons and habits. Like you would have a habit and then you would attach lessons to it, and then we'd go to the next habit and then that would have lessons to it. And it would be like habit 1, lessons, habit 2, lessons, habit 3, lessons. And it was this nice, clean, sequential order. At the beginning, you can't really change a whole lot of anything. And the client just gets a like, yes or no, did the thing or not did the thing. And like that solved our initial problem. But like, we're like, okay, there's actually a lot more problems that need to be solved. And so we had to start figuring out how we solve the next problem with our current stuff that we're doing. And honestly, when we look back at it, like when we look at version 1 of Coach Catalyst, like it's like, or just a habit catalyst, right? You probably, if you do some searches on the internet, you might be able to find like screenshots here, like YouTube videos or stuff that we did, right? And it's like, it's embarrassing almost, right? Like it's terrible. Like we got people to pay us money for this? Like what?
Yeah, it was. I mean, basically, we took handouts and it was digitized.
Yeah,
that's it. Like that's literally all. It was like a list of handouts digitized, and it looked terrible. It was only on a computer. There was no mobile app. There was no accessing it on your phone. It was you log onto a computer and like you get an email and then you click it and you can go read your lessons somewhere.
Right. Yep.
Like that's what it was.
God,
I still have all the screenshots and I pull them up every once in a while and show the progression. And oh man,
I forgot that it wasn't even mobile right away. Like I forgot that it was all email based. It was like you got the thing in your email and then you clicked it and then it took you to our servers and then you clicked yes or no and then you read your lesson and
you had to be logged in then. Like it was a pain. Like you're talking about removing friction. Like we want to like reduce friction for people. There was a lot of friction to use our software. A lot.
So thank you to the early users, right? Because the only reason we continued on was because we had enough people. Like it wasn't like we launched this thing and it just like friggin' blew up out of nowhere and it's all of the tech headlines that you read in Fast Company, right? No, it was very much like, okay, we have enough users, like we're gaining more users. It appears that there's a problem that we're solving and that people are valuing it. We're probably hitting a unique time where behavior change is becoming really interesting to more people, especially in the coaching space. Thank you to Precision Nutrition and like certifying new coaches and that kind of stuff. And so I think we kind of we're kind of like right on the cusp of this like change in thinking, which allowed us to get users to be like, okay, I see what you guys are trying to do. Like it's working ish. So like, but I'm willing to like hang on and pay you guys some money, which then allows you to keep developing. Because the other thing we haven't talked about at all is we took zero funding, right? We didn't go out and raise $1 million from a VC firm on an idea. We had an idea and we had enough money in our bank accounts to be like, okay, all right, cool. Like we have $20,000. What are we going to do with it? Right. What do we want to build? And so one of the unique things that I personally think on why it's went the way that it's went is we had to be very, very cognizant of what are we going to build? We only have this much money. What can we build for this much money that's going to have the most impact in both our current users, helping them have a better experience, but also to attract more users because we need more revenue in order to keep this thing going, right? And so we always had to play this game of like, we have a fixed amount of money. How do we best like utilize these resources?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, we couldn't just, of course we wanted to do everything, right? We wanted to be able to do everything under the sun and there was no chance it was going to happen. Right. So it was more of a like, okay, each sprint we did, adding new things, we knew it was going to cost X amount of dollars. And so it was basically this like, okay, what's the biggest impact that we can make in this next sprint that's going to keep people and draw in new people? And it was just a totally different way of thinking. And I think it just kind of opened our eyes to a lot. it made us super, super specific in what we needed, and we couldn't waste anything, right? Like we could not waste time and money with poor communication between us and the dev team and building the wrong things. Like we had that a couple times, and it hurt. It hurt the bank account big.
Right.
So, I mean, it was a big lesson and all that.
Right. And at this point, we were all in. Yeah. So pretty close to around this time, I had gotten my gyms to a point where I could step away from day-to-day operations. And so my family made the decision to be like, hey, and at this time it was my wife and I, and so we hadn't had kids yet. So we decided, hey, we're gonna move to Madison, Wisconsin. It was good for us to be able to get out of kind of small town and get to Madison. A good excuse for us. But now we're in a closer proximity as well. So Kane and I can go to the same co-working space and we can go over stuff, and we can meet with the dev team. It doesn't always just need to be Kane. And so we're in this space to really give it a go. Right. And so I was in Madison for 9 months or so, and we can get into the story on why I had to move away when we get to that point of the story. But I think that was a big key early on too, was, hey, we're just going to get in the same space and get kind of separated from, I could get kind of separated from my gyms for a nice period of time to be like, how do we get this thing? How do we get some traction with this thing, get it off the ground, and really get it into the hands of more people?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I mean, you never know what would have happened, right? But I don't know if it would have actually taken off the way it did if you wouldn't have done that. I think the proximity of both of us, I mean, proximity is power. We know that. Like being in the same city was huge. I mean, you had 95% of your time focused on, I was more in the gym at that time. I was probably 50-50, 60-40, something like that. I was still training a lot and getting my gym up and going still. And so I couldn't devote as much to the software where you did. And that really, I think, helped. And so it's always looking back, you never know what would have happened, obviously. But I think that was a big, big key at that point of our company's history. We needed that, right? That just accelerated us a lot.
And we're probably at this point we'll probably still call it year one. I don't really know if I will count the computer science department at the University of Wisconsin as being part of, but actual development, we're still in year one. Yep. Right. And so right now, as of this recording, the company is 6.5 years old. I believe, and will be kind of June is our birthday. So yeah, I mean, we're in year one at this point. And again, a product that looks absolutely nothing. They wouldn't even resemble, if you put them side by side right now with our current product, you would think they're different. Right. Oh, yeah. And so we were in a unique position too in Madison, right? So Madison is a very kind of startup friendly, kind of almost like a mini tech hub of the Midwest, but not like a big city like Chicago. It's very intimate, which is cool because you can get to know major players in different spaces very easily. Or you're kind of one person away. Hey, I'll make that introduction and do that kind of stuff. And they're very startup supportive, meaning there's co-working spaces, there's different meetups, there's these different groups that are really willing to help startups grow and being in that climate, just from things like lawyers, right? We were part of what was the thing called Startup Madison, or what was it?
MadWorks, I think it was. Weren't we in MadWorks?
MadWorks, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So the other thing I think people should know too is we were in a unique position from a resource standpoint. Is Kane's dad is very connected in the entrepreneur community in Madison, has done some really cool things there. And so being in that community with some of those connections, it just opened some doors and helped us maybe find the answers we needed a little bit quicker because of the supportive community and the ability of hey, there's some clout in the community. Someone trusts Terry. And so they're going to, maybe give us a little bit of a hand here and there, which was huge early on.
Yeah. I mean, just MadWorks in general. I mean, it was a small accelerator. I would have never heard about it. My dad was the one that said, hey, go apply for this. And we applied, and I mean, they set us up with lawyers. I think an accountant. Yep. Somebody wrote our terms and conditions, or helped us write our first terms and conditions, which I don't know what to write on terms and conditions for a software company. Like, you kidding me?
Right.
So it really helped get some of those foundational stuff set right away without like us having to try to figure out ourselves. And I think we got some grant money. We got like $5,000 of grant money, which back then was huge for us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we got free co-working space as well. So
yeah, we got free
we were able to go there and use that as we needed to, and really just get connected to that community, because it's a bunch of startups. They kind of take a group of people on. It was completely free. Like, we didn't have to give up any equity. We didn't really have to give up anything. We just had to show up to the meetings, and then kind of present at the end and do all of that stuff, which was awesome, and kind of helped us, because both of us, again, we're in a completely, yes, we would kind of run businesses, but this is completely different.
Yes.
Right. We're in a completely different field and needing completely different things, and a lot more complex because of all of the rules and regulations, and it's just a completely different field. So, I mean, I think that was a huge piece early on in helping us get a footing, get that foundation, and continue to build. And, I mean, you could kind of say the rest is history, but there was a lot that happened in between there. And I don't know if you have any specific stories or things that come to mind, but do you have anything?
So I still remember. So as we're building this out, right? Like, so Trevor's a PN level 2, I think it is. I think I was PN level 1. Yep. We both loved precision nutrition. And during our, investigative phase, if you call it, we talked to PN. And we even said, like, hey, you guys need to build a software. Like, you have your software you use with clients who join, lean eating. Let us use it. Like, us as coaches, we need to use this. No. We're not, can't do that. We're not going to do that. Come on. You need to be able to do this. You'd have so many people doing this. No. Yep. And that's one of the reasons, that's one of the things that made us start our own. And I don't remember if we had launched yet, or it was really close after we launched or right before we launched. They announced Pro Coach. And I remember that day.
I think we launched first.
Yes, I agree. I think we launched first, and like 3 months later or something, they launched Pro Coach. And just immediately I felt like a gut punch. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is what we wanted you to do years ago. And this is like the only reason. And I remember thinking in my head, like, how can we ever compete with precision nutrition? Like, we're nobodies. We don't know software. How could we ever do that? And I think you moving to Madison, like, I think that was a big part of it, is we were in the same city. We could go back and forth. We could say, no, like, we can do this. Like, that kind of gave us the confidence to be able to take on something like a precision nutrition and Pro Coach, which turned out to be completely different. I mean, we sure is habit tracking, but like, it was very, very different types of software.
Yeah, we had different paths and different visions for kind of what we're creating. And it's funny because I've done a couple master classes or summits with JB, and be able to have him on. Hopefully we'll get him on the podcast a little bit and he could talk more about it. But yeah, 100%, right? Because PN was doing their thing. Like, they had the lean eating, right? They were kind of direct to consumer, but then they also were educating coaches. And so now they had kind of a pool of people. Where at that point we had been in the industry, right? So just being in the industry long enough, you make some connections and you kind of part of circles. We were part of masterminds. We were willing to invest in like our education and our business education and that kind of stuff. And so for us, nothing is ever done alone. Like nothing, like everyone always has support, no matter where. Like, there are people that support you. And so whether it was, having kind of Kane's dad as kind of helping us with some entrepreneurial stuff, or being at a point where we had some extra income that we can invest into this, or being part of a community, and even part of like the fitness community. Like, I have to give a shout out to Pat Rigsby, who was kind of my business mentor. He was my first kind of business coach. I was part of their organization and really learned everything about business from his organization at the time. And when we launched, like, he was a big part of helping us get it out there because we had worked with him for a long time and he kind of trusted us and those kind of things. And so, which helped us to get a little bit of traction and at least get it into more people's hands. And so like, I'm forever grateful for him for kind of helping us get some of that traction. Cause that's like a lot of times at the beginning, that's the hardest thing, right? We're not like revolutionizing the world where it's like, you're just going to see something and, oh yeah, I need that. Like it's kind of a little bit new.
Yeah, definitely. I fully agree with that. Pat was probably the biggest influence in our growing right away. And I still remember the other very, very distinct memory I have is setting up a Stripe account, which back then, like, what's Stripe? Like, I have no clue. Our developers just told us, I need to make this Stripe thing. It's kind of like PayPal. I'm like, okay, whatever. Sure, here's a Stripe account. And you're like, connect it. And those first dollars hitting our Stripe account and getting, back then we had an email like every single time a charge was initiated because it was a big deal, right? And the first time somebody paid us for the software, I remember thinking that was like my probably a first realization, like other people wanted this, right? Like, we think people want it. They say, oh, this would be great. This would be awesome. But honestly, up until that point, deep down, I was probably just building it for us still. Like it was probably just like, you know what? If nobody wants it, it's for our gyms. We can use it.
Yes. 100%.
And that, I think, was the first realization of like, all right, like, let's do this. Like other people are willing to put their money down to take this terrible product right now. We know we can improve it. We have a good vision. Let's go for it.
That's a very real thing. Cause I think in my head, my mindset at the time, cause both you and I were like, okay, hey, we're going to plunk a few grand into a bank account every month. And then, we get enough, we're going to kind of develop that next thing. Right. So we were just kind of as much as we could, we're just putting it into these accounts and then we can develop. And in my mind, it was like, okay, if this thing fails from going out to the greater good, right? I was like, at least I can take this and I can use it in my own facilities to provide a better experience for my clients. And I feel like it's going to help our coaching process in our facilities. And so it's like, all success doesn't hinge on this becoming an awesome product for other people. It's like, you know what? At the end of the day, we're coaches and we have clients that we want to help, and this will help our clients. And so, if it doesn't sell, cool, we can use it for our own clients and we're going to be better off because of it. Yeah.
And I think there has to be a big recognition for our wives too. Cause like, so at that point, we're taking money
still to this day.
Still this day. Yes. A lot, but we're taking money that, we're making from our gyms that would probably go to our families and our lives. And we're putting into this software thing. Like, we didn't really know what it was, what's it going to do. And they trusted us enough to let us explore that and get to a point. And we're at a very transition phase in our families too. Like my daughter was born 2 weeks before we launched to the public. Asher you guys were pregnant with,
October.
Asher at that point.
October would have been like 4 months later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we both had our first kids within the first 3 to 4 months of launching the software. So like that just adds a lot to it. Like there's family transitions. We're putting money into this thing that we don't know what it is. Like there was just a lot of trust. And I think that went back to our relationship. Like if you would have been some random person that I met as a co-founder, my wife probably would not be up for that. But like she knew you for so long. We knew they all knew each other. We all knew each other so well that there was that trust.
Right. And I think just from a history standpoint, we're both of the mindset that we'll figure it out, right? Like we have enough faith in our work ethic that, you know what, we maybe don't know how to do this, but we can figure it out and we're going to make something of this. And we were both very heavily invested in it. And probably a piece of it was like our own gyms, right? We had our gyms and at this point, like you weren't necessarily thinking about selling your gym. You were still like very heavily involved in day-to-day operations. And so it's like, this is just going to help us run better gyms. And things obviously evolved from that. But like, I think that helped at the beginning of feeling like there's a purpose behind it. And we're not just trying to develop this thing to sell to market. It's like, we're developing this thing for us. And if other people want this, awesome. We can turn it into a business and it's going to be awesome. And then we started to get some traction, and then it starts to shift like, man, like maybe there is like a need in the market for this, and we really need to start getting into that. Because when we did development for probably how long? Like true development, not computer science development. A year and a half?
I was going to say 9 months to a year. I think after 9 months, we started getting like beta users and other stuff. And then probably about a year, we actually launched it officially.
Right. And I think it was June of 2000. Was it 15 or 16?
16.
When was your daughter done?
16.
I should know because Asher was born in the same year. That's the hardest question. That is the hardest question now when you're at the doctor's office and they go, what's your kid's birthday? And I'm like I know the day because Asher was born after my birthday. So like it's 21st of October. Cool. But then I'm like in my, like, how old is he now? Counting back. Yes. And then you've got another one in between. It's like, oh, what is his like?
So that's the tricky part is the two, right? So like mine are 2016 and 2019, which for some reason, just because 6 and 9, like they can flip, like it just always screws me up. So I'm always like, oh shoot, like which one are you? 16. Now before I've said my oldest, I'm like, oh yeah, 2019. They're like, do you want to try again? I'm like, sure, 2016, thank you.
Right. I told one lady one time, it was Ezra's birthday, and I'm like, I think it's May 17th. May 17th, and I just said a year. And I'm like, I'm not quite 100% sure on that. I will get back to you the next time I come in with some confirmation on whether or not that's his birthday, but that is what it is. So, all right. So, we launch in June, right before Pro Coach, in my mind. And we launch in June. And we get this thing rolling. We have at this point paying users. So when I say launch, I'm saying like, hey, people are giving us money for this thing, right? We had beta users and people like helping us a little bit early on for free. And then we had beta users. And so do you remember when we launched, were we $97 or $99 for it?
As a coach that runs challenges, I needed my life back. I had stuff all over the place. A Facebook group for community interaction, Google Sheets for check-ins and measurements, and was drowning in email communication. As my challenges grew past just a handful of people, I started to notice clients were falling through the cracks. I began researching virtual assistants because I just couldn't manage it all. And truthfully, the client experience was going down the drain. Luckily, a friend recommended Coachcatalyst and just told me to trust her. I'm sure glad I did. Now I can run my challenges with 2 or 200 clients with just a few clicks. The lessons get delivered on the right days, the accountability happens automatically, and most importantly, the communication is all in one spot. I even created 2 new challenges from the Coachcatalyst library. Best part, didn't have to change a thing. I used to spend 15 minutes just trying to log into all the apps I needed. Now I log in and my dashboard tells me who needs a shout out and who needs a kick in the butt in about 15 seconds. I feel like a huge weight is lifted off of my shoulders. I can finally spend my time coaching again instead of worrying about all the admin work. Do your brain a favor and get Coachcatalyst.
Oh boy. I thought we were 39 because we had the 2 tier. We started with 1 tier, then we had the 2 tier. Remember the basic and the
basic
pro?
Yep.
So you could do communication and metric. That was a little bit later on. You could do like communication and metric tracking for basic, and then pro was 99. But I think when we first launched, it was 79 or 99. One of the two.
Which is crazy. For what we were putting out there,
for
right?
What it was.
Yeah. Oh. And then we originally launched with like the freemium model, right? With the free trial model. Which we can talk a little bit about and what we might have learned from that, because we've then have since kind of went away with that, and we've kind of come back to it, and we've kind of like talked about it a lot in doing it, because like at this point now we're building a business, so it's like okay, this thing is now we need this thing to like support itself, right? We can only fund this thing for so long before it needs to start supporting itself. We had a runway, and we weren't necessarily looking for any outside money. Like we wanted to kind of bootstrap this thing, and because we ultimately really wanted the control, right? When you take on outside money, there's other interests that are involved. And we're like, we know how to build, we know the need that we're serving. And so we want to build this the way we think it needs to be built. And so we're like, all right, we got to do it with our own money, right? And so that first, we started with the freemium trial or with the free trial. And I remember this very distinctly. We got Pat to send an email for us, right? We got Pat to send an email for us. I don't know why he did it. Maybe we were just so nice to him, but he sent an email for us that basically said, hey, like, check out this new habit tracker. It's awesome. It's going to help, hold your clients accountable, yada, yada, yada. He sent this email out, and Pat's got a really good list, good people, big list. And so going out to thousands and thousands of people, I remember we got like 300 signups or something on like,
we got more than
like the first day.
It was close to 1,000. It was tons. And in my mind, I'm like, this is amazing. Like, we made it.
Right. Yes.
But the problem was everybody signed up because in his email he said, it's free. So why not?
Yes.
Sign up. It's free. And they never logged in again.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the issue. We did not have a process set up to convert people from a freemium. Like, it was free forever, is with 3 clients or something like that. Like, use it forever, whatever you want. And nobody would log in again to add another client or use it. And so we just had this pool of people sitting there who logged in once and never again.
And it's, you look back on that stuff now and knowing what we know now. Like, I mean, like when we really look at it, we had no idea what we were doing. Like we had I shouldn't say no idea. Like, we had an idea on what we're doing, but we hadn't been in the technology SaaS space very long. We didn't really have a lot of research in this space. A lot of our knowledge was kind of coming off of a service business in the offline space in gyms, and which is a whole lot different. And like we needed a price, like we need a certain amount of users in order to like pay the bills, right? And so we're like, oh, free, right? Yeah, we'll just get a bunch of people and they're going to just love it and they'll just start using it and we'll be good. And they love the idea of it, right? They love this. So, but there was, even though we didn't get virtually anything from that, from a user standpoint, we did get the idea that, okay, hey, this is interesting enough for people to click, to enter their email, to put in their name. There must be more of a problem here. We're just not communicating or executing in the right way. So despite that being like a quote unquote failure, it was like, okay, yeah, it's a failure from a user standpoint, but we know that I think we're on the right path, right?
Yeah, definitely. It validated stuff for us, I think. I mean, I think a very, listening to this now, right? Like, startups are sexy right now and like tech, like it's all in the news and everything. It was not the case back then. It was not at all. It was not this mainstream idea. Going into a software or an app or, development was not a common thing. And so now you can go on, you can learn all this stuff about freemium and how to grow users and like SaaS hacks and like nobody knows what a SaaS was.
Right.
Like, I remember seeing the acronym. I was like, I have no clue what software as a service. Like, what does that even mean?
Right.
And so it was a very different time. And I think it was just, we were learning as we were going. There wasn't necessarily a playbook that you could just, like right now, there's a bunch of playbooks out there. You can just pull up and just go. And you can grow pretty quickly if you have a good idea and a good market. It wasn't that case back then. We were learning as we were going. And yeah, there were failures, but I thought we did a really good job of learning from them, taking the lessons, tweaking, kind of finding our path and pushing through.
The other thing that we didn't do was make the catastrophic mistake, right? Yeah. The one mistake that kills the entire company, right? We were willing to take risks, but not risks that would potentially, bankrupt or make the company non-existent, right? I think that's a huge thing in an iteration, in a learning process, is you need to make mistakes, but the mistakes can't be so good that you don't live to play another day. And so I think we did a good job of taking appropriate risks, where we were able to learn from those kind of mistakes or failures, but not the big ones that would then, okay, man, we got to shut this thing down because like, I don't got any money left. You don't got any money left. And I don't know if we can get some VC money, and like, I need to put food on the table and pay my mortgage and all of that fun stuff. Right. Yeah. And so I think that's huge in any company if you don't make the catastrophic mistake early on, or really at any point, but early on, especially because things are magnified because you just don't have the revenue or you don't have the bandwidth to be able to kind of like make that happen.
Yeah. The thing that really, I think, helped us get through that time was our relationships in the industry. I mean, if we were two random
100%.
people who looked at fitness and said, oh, they need a habit tracker and tried to go in, we would have failed right away. But the fact that we had, relationships with Pat, just relationships with business owners all over the country from all of our meetings and events and past experiences, they gave us more leeway. Yep. They would communicate 100%. With us better. So like they would stick longer, or they would just like, if I'm on a software and something doesn't work, I don't like it, I just leave. I don't reach out to them and try to tell them how. Like, I just leave. But our first users would talk to us. They would come back. Oh, no. Like, it needs to do this, or I would like it to do this. And it helped get that feedback loop a lot quicker. That helped us iterate and become a lot better.
Because, those first users were people that we knew. Right. Yeah. Like I knew who they were. Like I had been in meeting rooms with them. Like I had their cell phone numbers. Like, so I think in those relationships, they were able to give us a little bit more slack on where we're at. They kind of like saw, hey, I see what you guys are trying to do here. Yeah, it's not perfect, but I'm willing to give you the $39 or the $99 a month because I believe that what you're going to continue to improve it, and it's going to help me. And you're willing to listen to what I'm saying. And because like you just have a relationship. And so like early and still to this day, like I think we have a really good relationship with our users. And I know a lot of them because, you meet them at events and because we're in the industry, right? So we've seen them at summits and at conferences and these places. And when we go, we meet up and we say hi and we like know them as people. And so, I would agree with you 100% on early on. Having those relationships was critical in allowing us to just continue to take another step and make it a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. Because we just weren't in a position where we had $1 million and we could go build this thing and then launch it to the world and hope that people wanted it and hope that it solved a problem. Like we were like, okay, what do you need next? Like, what's next? We need messaging. Cool. All right, let's do some messaging stuff. We need metrics because you want to store your body comps. All right, figure out how to do it. Right. And it was just kind of like feature by feature. So anything you want to kind of iterate on that? And then I think we need to take a little break.
Yeah, I think you just said that really well. Yeah, I think the personal touch, the people behind the business is a huge key.
Yeah,
software is seen as cold, right? It's this numbers math problem behind computers that doesn't have personality. It's very cold.
Yep.
And I think having a personal face behind it, having a relationship helped. I think to this day it helps. I think people still gravitate towards us because they know us as people. Right. They want to support us. They know what type of people we are and we're trying to do well. Hell, I still am a user of certain softwares because of the founder. I have a relationship with them or like a personal connection with them. That's it. The software isn't any better. There's other softwares that are much better these days, but I still feel that personal connection. I think that's true in any business. Software doesn't get talked about a lot with that because it is more about like the tech and everything. But it's true. We as people, we buy people. We don't always buy things. We buy people and we buy outcomes.
Right. And maybe it was a little bit more natural for us because of the businesses we were in before, the business we were in before, right? When you're in a coaching business, you're in a service-based business, and it is about the relationships that you have with your clients, right? Like here's actually a really good example in our facilities. So in our facilities, we do team training and we also do semi-private training. So semi-private to us is like 3 clients to a coach or 4 clients to a coach in an hour, where team training can be 15, 20 people in a room. Our stick rate with semi-private is exponentially better than our stick rate with group training. And my theory behind it is because of the relationship that is formed in that kind of intimate 1-to-4, 1-to-3. Sometimes it's 1-to-1 because other people don't show up. And you just form such a strong relationship with that client that, like, I've had clients with me since the day I started. Like, my first client is still training at the gym, right? And like,
well, that's not your
all
mom,
of me
though,
thinks
right?
that it's well, my mom is still training at the gym, but she's in group training.
Oh, okay. Well, that doesn't count. Come on now.
So, but my first like client that I worked with, like that was paying me money, is still there. And like when I think about our clients that stick the longest are the clients that have the strongest relationships with our coaches.
Yes.
And so I think naturally for us, like, hey, that's just what we know, right? That's just like, this is how we work. And so that just led into, like, we didn't know anything about tech or like how you're supposed to operate or this or that, or, you know, all of those kind of things. And so like, we just operate from where we're at. And so we wanted to know those users. We wanted to figure out their problems. So, yeah.
And I think that's the perfect reason why our software is done well is every single feature that we build, everything we look at, one of the lenses we use is, does this strengthen the coach-client relationship? Like that's been a foundation since the beginning. It's not, you know, hey, how can I take the coach away? How can I, yes, I'm going to save time with this, but it's not trying to distance myself, which I think a lot of automation, a lot of tech, that's what people think, right? Like, oh, I don't have to do anything. I just sit back and it does it all. And that's not the way we've approached it. We save you a ton of time. We let you, you know, coach hundreds of clients more in the same amount of time, but we strengthen the coach-client relationship through technology because that's the pillar of all, you know, fitness. It's that relationship that's key.
Oh, right. I mean, the path that we're on, and we'll get into a lot of this later, is not about replacing a coach. It's about like giving a coach superpowers. So that's why I always say super coach, right? Because it's like, we want the relationship. We want that relationship with the coach and the client. We just want you to have way more relationships, because the more relationships you have, the more money you're going to make, the more lives you're going to change, the bigger the impact you're going to have. Right. And if you can do that with less stress and in less time, like, we're winning. Right. And so the software is like a superpower. It's augmenting what you already do as a coach so that you can just expand that massively. And that's, I mean, that's the lens we look at anything. This with a new feature, does this make the relationship stronger, or does this just feel automated? Does it feel weird? Because that kind of happened with email, right? When email first came out, like being able to do like sequences and like automated emails and all that kind of stuff, it was like, whoa, man, this is crazy. Like, how are they responding to me so quickly? And then now it's just like, man, like, you know, when you're getting an autoresponder. And I love how one of our autoresponders, you're like, hey, this is an automated email. So people understand it. We're just like straight up with it. Doesn't mean that I don't want a response from it, but like, this is an automated email, you know, but let me know why you joined Coach Catalyst. We really want to know so that we're making sure that we're creating the best product for you. Right. Yeah. And so I think that's this origin story is probably going to take us a few episodes. So I think that's a good stopping point. We've covered maybe the first third of at least like what happened before Coach Catalyst, why did it come about, and like first beginning origins. And then I think next we can get into kind of like up to kind of present day stuff, and we'll see where that takes us, and we'll go from there. So yeah, I mean, you got anything else for today?
No, I think we covered a lot. It's been fun rehashing old college days. We didn't get into too many embarrassing college stories, which is nice. We could go that on a different, maybe not podcast, but I think it's fun looking back, right? It's fun to see where you came from, where a business came from, and the reason why certain things are set up a certain way, and a lot of them have to do with those foundations, like the trust, the relationship, the communication, the relationships we have in our industry, all of that played into what we are today.
And I mean, and honestly, like we have no like agenda here. We have no outline coming into this. And so this is just it's fun. Like we're coming up with stories that I like hadn't even thought about before this. And so for us, this is really fun being able to go back, because I think so many times you get so like heads down on what do we need to get done today? And like, this isn't working. Like it can be very frustrating in any business, right? Like the business you're in right now for the people listening to this. But when you look back to like, man, like there's actually been some really, really, really big things that have happened, since I first started my business. And so that was a big piece of impetus for this, was us to rehash and kind of like maybe take a step back for a period of time and like, let's go through some of this stuff. And there's some lessons in here that hopefully you can take away as the listener and kind of implement into your own business. And maybe you look at our business a little bit differently because you know a little bit more of the history behind it and the people behind it and where we're coming from. So definitely stay tuned for next week. We're going to get into go ahead.
We'll say one thing. So if you learned anything from this, if you meet somebody for the first time and your initial reaction is, I hate you, one of two things. You're either right, like maybe that person's just a jerk and you're going to hate them, or they could become one of your best friends, business partners, everything else in life. So, I mean, just take that for what it is. The next time you see somebody, you say, I hate you right away.
Hopefully it's more of the latter and less of the other.
Hopefully there's more of those in your life, yes.
But all right, everyone, check us out next week. We'll get into a little bit more Coach Catalyst and probably bring you up closer to present day. So thanks, brother, for hanging out, man. So much fun.
Thank you. It's been fun. Looking forward to it.
All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Coach Catalyst podcast. If you are a coach looking to do more for your clients than just workouts, give Coach Catalyst a test drive. Try it for 14 days. Jump on call with your personal strategy coach, Ashley, and see how easy technology can be, all for free. Tell them Trevor sent you. Until next time, keep changing lives.